The Democratic Socialists of America have put out their party platform. Let's see if you can spot the problems with it. Welcome to Sharpening Arrows, where we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. Now, if you are watching on YouTube, youtube.com/@sharpeningarrows, youtube.com/@sharpeningarrows, you can tell that I am not in my normal location. This is not my normal studio setup, which is true. I am traveling and great to be near family, but I just have to say, if my children come in and are either even louder than normal, you have been warned. One of my least favorite things as a high school student was a pop quiz. I don't know if you've ever had a pop quiz, but they are a little bit terrifying because you didn't know what to expect. And at least I was one of the students who really liked to study before test, get really prepared, and all of a sudden the pop quiz, I wasn't prepared, maybe, or I wasn't as prepared as I'd like to be. Well, bad news, because that's what we're doing today for both students who are listening and parents who are listening. And this is a unique podcast. I encourage, of course, parents and teens and preteens to listen together, but we are going to test your ability to work through issues by examining the Democratic Socialist of America Party platform, or as they call it, a program. So what we're going to do is we are just going to read through parts of it. We're not going to get through the whole thing. It's quite long, but let's read through parts of it, and then let's talk about what's appealing about what it's said and what the problems are. And this is important because there are a significant number of young people who are really interested in socialism, who think it's very attractive, who thinks it's the answers to the world's problems. And let's dig in and see if they're right. All right. Imagine, this is from the Democratic Socialists of America Party platform. Imagine taking a day off from work in a future without capitalism. Okay, we actually need to pause there. I'm going to go out of order here a little bit, but remember question 5 of the grade 8 are questions that we put in our mental toolbox to help us dissect issues. When we hear a word like capitalism, we should make sure that we have a definition of what capitalism is. Now, true capitalism is the idea that people are free to create businesses, free to trade goods and services for money. You're free to buy things that aren't destructive to broader society, or in some cases yourself. But generally, you are free. And generally, people are free to sell things. And they, as a result of those transactions, businesses or individuals earn a profit. Now, there is another type of capitalism, kind of a skewed version of capitalism that's not capitalism at all, but that's called crony capitalism. And that's where instead of things being free, the government comes in and says, oh, you have to purchase a certain number of these items. Or, oh, this is the only company that's going to be supplying this. Or, oh, we're going to give this company a handout because of the benefits they supposedly provide society as a whole. That's called crony capitalism. And I want to make a really clear distinction between those two things, because there are a lot of problems with crony capitalism. But I hope you've understood and kind of heard the difference. Capitalism, or the free market, as we might call it, is just that. People are freely trading goods and services. Crony capitalism is where the government comes in and interferes in some way. But the socialists here are talking about capitalism in the free market sense. All right, this is, again, the DSA program or platform. Imagining a world without capitalism. It might not feel as badly needed as it does now. You enjoy your work. It's interesting to you, and you're well trained for it. You work as much as you are able and no more than needed, and you would control your own labor and see it going to good use. It's not just a job to pay bills. All right, I really want to hone in on this line of you work as much as you are able and no more than needed. Because this is really key to the socialist idea, is that, you work what you want to do, other people work what they want to do, and then we share these things collectively. So let's have a pause point. That is a very unique thing about this podcast. I encourage you to actually stop the podcast and discuss these questions with your teenagers. What is attractive about this idea? And again, the idea is you work as much as you are able and no more than needed. Okay, I really want you to pause on that, because this is an attractive idea, right? You work as much as you are able and no more than needed. So I get to set my own schedule. When I don't really feel like going to work, I don't have to go to work. And yet, and this is continuing on in the thing, the DSA says, speaking of bills, you don't really have them anymore. Okay, so I work when I want to and I don't have any bills. That's attractive. Okay, that is extremely appealing. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, that this would be a wonderful thing if it was possible. Okay, and we also need to understand that this is actually sort of the default in life. You know, this is actually how we kind of come into the world as a baby. All of us come in. We literally can't do any work. All we can do is cry when we need something. And someone else swoops in and tries to figure out, is the baby hungry? Does the baby have a dirty diaper? Does the baby need to go to sleep? Do I need to hold the baby? What do I need to do to make the baby happy? Okay, so this is kind of something that everyone starts out life with. And one of the challenges of parenting, is that your child doesn't naturally move away from this. You have to help them move away, because there is something very attractive about doing what you want and having all your bills paid. Okay, so we know it's an attractive idea, but what's the problem with the idea? And I'm going to read a little bit more of the DSA platform so you can kind of get a sense of what they're selling. You have no debt. You don't need health insurance. You don't pay a mortgage or have a landlord, because comfortable housing is a human right. Your retirement is publicly funded. Food, education, energy, medicine, and transportation aren't for-profit businesses. They are common goods and utilities. Okay, enough about bills. See, we don't even have to worry about bills. What do you do on your day off? Maybe in the morning you walk your kids to school, run errands, or go to a doctor's appointment. In the afternoon, you might play a sport, practice a new skill, read, plan a trip. In the evening, you can meet up with friends or family and eat together, maybe go to the movies and down to the park. Basically, every day is a Saturday, and there are no Mondays. That's the socialist pitch. All right, so let's go to the grade 8 questions. Let's have a pause point. Which of the grade 8 questions would you use to respond to this argument? And as a reminder, the grade 8 questions are the questions that we put in our mental toolbox in order to unpack and dig into an idea and see if it holds up under scrutiny. And as a reminder, the grade 8 questions are: question 1, what happens next? Question 2, has this been tried before? Question 3, is there a principle involved? Question 4, what are the trade-offs? Question 5, what do you mean by that? Question 6, is this an appeal to emotion or logic? Question 7, am I focused on the speaker or the argument? And question 8, what does the Bible say? All right, I hope you picked one, because this is the easy part of the pop quiz. Any of these questions will be very, very appropriate. When you have a big topic like socialism, you can take any of these questions and you can use them effectively to unpack and examine this argument. But I'm actually going to start with a couple of questions that are kind of a little less directly focused on the argument. I'm going to go to question 6. Is this an appeal to emotion or logic? Okay, because when someone comes and says, you can have everything you want and you don't have to work very hard, what are they appealing to? They're appealing to your emotion. Wow, yes, that sounds awesome. I completely want to do this. And they're hoping that you turn your brain off when it comes to the question of So how is this possible? That's what the socialists are trying to do. And actually, I'm going to go to question 8 next. Again, we're going to kind of walk our way through this because there are a lot of ways to go after what's presented here by the socialists. But I'm going to question 8. What does the Bible say? And I want to have another pause point. Are there any verses that you can think of that would be applicable to what we just read in the socialist platform? What do you think? Because I think sometimes there's this idea among Christians, among especially young Christians, that socialism is actually kind of this moral idea because everyone has enough and everyone works as hard as they're supposed to. But if you go into the Bible and if you examine biblical principles, you will find some pretty clear conflicts with socialism. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians 3:10. This is Paul writing. For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule: the one who is unwilling to work shall not eat. Okay, so here's Paul saying, if you want to eat, you better do something productive to be earning and being producing something. Let's go to the I lost it here. Let's go to the 10. All right, let's go to the 10 commandments in Exodus 20. The 10th commandment: you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Okay, so when God says don't covet, don't envy something that belongs to someone else, that there's an assumption there. Do you see what that is? The assumption is that other people have things that belong to them. And it is wrong to even envy after those things. If you go to the 8th commandment, it's you shall not steal. And so I think these will kind of come into play in a little bit. But if you take the principle of don't envy what someone has, the underlying assumption there is that other people have things that belong to them, their own private property, and they don't belong to you. And you shouldn't long for those things in an envious way. You shouldn't covet after them. And you definitely shouldn't steal those things. And you can't outsource your thievery to the government. That doesn't make it okay. All right, let's go to John 16:33. This is Jesus talking. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, you have overcome the world. And this is kind of a bigger picture critique of the socialist worldview. But what you will see with socialism is they are trying to present this idea of we can have utopia. We can have a world without want, without struggle, without strife here on earth. And what we see very clearly throughout the scriptures is that heaven is not the Christian's home. We are to wisely steward both our time on earth, our possessions, and if we get a chance to participate in the government, wisely. But we don't expect as a Christian to have heaven here on earth. And so when the socialist lays out this vision, this utopian vision, that actually as a Christian should raise an alarm bell, because we know there can never be heaven on earth. All right, and then I'm going to go to Psalms 146, 3 through 4. Do not put your trust in princes and mortal men who cannot save. When their spirit departs, they return to the ground. On that very day, their plans come to nothing. Blessed is he whose help is the God of Jacob, whose hope is in the Lord his God. And this doesn't just apply to socialists. This is just kind of a general principle. But our hope as a Christian is not in any political leader, is not in any political system. Our hope is in the Lord. And so what you will see oftentimes with socialists and socialist leaders and communist leaders, what you will see is this idea of, well, if we just give the government a little more power, they will fix everything. We just need to give a little bit more, just a little more power, just a little more authority, just break a few more eggs to make the omelet, and then we'll have paradise here on earth. And I hope you can see how those things contradict and conflict with principles clearly laid out in the Bible. Okay, maybe you're listening or watching and you say, well, I'm not a Christian. Remember as a Christian, the reason we go to God's word, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, uh, God's word is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword. And so the Lord can take his word and change people's minds. But then also as a Christian, we know that the Bible is the shortcut. It's the shortcut to the answer. We can go and reason our way to the conclusions that the Bible already lays out, and we're going to do that. But if you just want the answer, if you just want to go to the back of the book and look at the answers to the test, you just go to the Bible. It tells you right there. Okay, but we still have this idea of a world without capitalism, a world without the free market, and we have socialism in its place. And so people are working as much as they want to, and their bills are paid. And you have all the housing, all the food, all the education, all the energy, medicine, transportation you want, because they aren't being run by for-profit businesses. They're being run by the collective, by the common good. And actually what we could do here is we could look at a definition of socialism as well. Again, going back to question 5, we've kind of laid out, through the socialist platform, what socialists seek to accomplish. But let's get a formal definition. This is from Merriam-Webster's. Any of the various egalitarian economic and political theories or movements advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods. Okay, so instead of Elon Musk owning a large share of Tesla, Tesla is now owned and operated and controlled by the government. All right, so let's go to question 1. We'll just start. We've kind of hit those questions, and in the bottom half of the grade 8, we'll go to question 1. What happens next? Okay, if maybe teens, let's have a pause point. Let me ask you to ask your parents. If you did not have to work as many hours as you do to pay your bills, would you work more, less, or the same? Okay, you would work less in almost every case. I'm sure there are some people who are, independently wealthy, and they could live on what they've earned, and they choose to work because they enjoy work. But for the vast majority of people, if you could make the same salary and earn the same amount of money and work less, you would work less. And that's simply a natural human inclination, because work is work. That's why there's a difference between work and leisure. Work is often something you feel like you have to do or you need to do in order to earn a paycheck or help your business survive. That is the nature of work. Okay, so if people didn't have to work as hard, what happens next? People don't work as much. And the socialists might come and say, well, if everyone just loved their job, that's not the case. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit about this in my personal life as an example of why this isn't the case. I love politics. Maybe you can guess because I host a podcast on politics. But I have always loved politics, even as a kid, back before, even a tiny number of teenagers were interested in politics. I love politics. I don't know why. It's just something I was always really interested in. And lo and behold, here I am, 25, 30 years later, and I am working in a job in politics. I write a newspaper column. It is an incredible job. It's an incredible blessing. And you know what? Someday it feels like work. I don't know what to tell you. Both of these things are true. I have an incredible job. It is an incredible blessing. I love my job. And some days I really don't want to sit down at the computer and write. And you know why I do it? Because it's work, because I need to work. All right, so if you tell people, okay, you don't have to work as much and you will have just as much stuff, just as much money, what's going to happen? People are going to work less. And if people work less, all right, let's have a pause point. If people do less work, what happens to stuff? Hopefully I phrased that question in a way that was logical. But if people do less work, less stuff is produced. Okay? There's no magic cell phone tree, car tree, energy tree in the backyard that people can just go out and, oh, I picked it, and there's all the stuff that I enjoy. all of the groceries that I can go get at the grocery store, they're just on the tree in the backyard, and all I have to do is roll out of bed and go grab it from the socialist tree, and I have it. Now you might say, well, fruit and it grows on trees, and crops grow in the fields. Okay, that's true. And you know how much work and capital investment and technology has gone into producing those groceries, and then let alone moving them sometimes halfway around the world into your grocery store. These things did not just happen by accident. And if you tell the world collectively, oh yeah, you can do less work, there's going to be less things at the grocery store. That's just how it's going to be. Okay, we can go to question 2. Has this been tried before? Has anyone in the history of the world ever had the idea that if we just all come together, we just come together in a big collective, and we work for the common good, and everyone takes, from each according to, I can't remember the quote, but everyone works as much as they need to, and they take what they need. Has that ever been tried before? Yes. And it's actually been tried here on the American continent. Now, granted, before America was even a country. This is from the John Locke Foundation, written by John Sanders. And he's going to describe what happened at Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in America. As Robert C. Elkson of Yale Law School observed in a 1993 paper, quote, land was held as a collective asset. You hear that? Collective asset. Just what socialism wants, right? We have egalitarian movements advocating collective ownership. That's what they had. That's what they had in Jamestown, collective ownership. And each settler was, quote, guaranteed an equal share of the common output, regardless of the amount of work personally contributed, end quote. Right there. That is socialism in a nutshell. What happened? This is Elkson writing. To the puzzlement of historians, the starving settlers shirked from catching fish and growing food. The most enduring image of Jamestown dates from May 1611, when Sir Thomas Dale found the inhabitants at their daily and usual works, bowling in the streets. Now, maybe they just had all the food they needed. Maybe they had that magic tree out there. They had planted the magic stuff tree, and they just went out and got everything they needed. No, actually, that's not what's happening. Sanders continues. In 1609, the colony had suffered a particularly cruel famine that killed most of the colony's population, which fell from 500 to only 60. So almost 90% of the people died out of famine. 2 years later, the daily and usual work in Jamestown was playing street ball. No wonder historians were puzzled. But when Jamestown abandoned socialism and moved to property rights and privatized agriculture, the results were immediate and resoundingly positive. What happened was Jamestown's governor, Sir Thomas Dale, began assigning 3-acre plots to the settlers in 1614. Captain John Smith wrote that productivity improved, quote, at least 7-fold, quote. Here's what he wrote. When our people were fed out of the common store and labored jointly together, glad was he could slip from his labor or slumber over his task. He cared not how, nay, the most honest among them would hardly take so much true pains in a week, as now for themselves they will do in a day. Neither cared they for the increase, presuming that howsoever the harvest prospered, the general store must be maintained them, so that we reap not so much corn from the labors of 30, as now 3 or 4 do provide for themselves. Okay, did you understand that? When people saw the benefit of their labor, when they were rewarded for their work with stuff that they got to keep, private property, what happened? All of a sudden, more stuff was produced. All of a sudden, there was not just a little bit more, but 7 or 10-fold more things in existence. And why was that? That was because people saw that there was a benefit to their labor, and so they worked harder. And this is the problem that socialism has. It promises that you just work what you want to, and there'll be enough for you. But, and again, we'll go to question 3. Is there a principle involved? Look at the idea of, do we live in a world of scarcity or in a world of plenty? Because what the socialist assumes is that all of the richness that we have in America, and we do have richness in America, all of that is just normal. That's just how things are. And so if we get rid of capitalism, we'll continue to have all this stuff. And so the irony is the capitalist says, actually, no, we live in a world of scarcity. We live in a world where human wants will always be limited by time, by possessions. And so how do we adapt to that world? Because there's not enough, how do we act? And the way we need to act and the way we need to structure society is we need to allow people to keep the benefit of their work so that they work more, so that they produce more. And again, if you go, this is where those principles we saw in the Bible, the idea of a man who doesn't work shouldn't eat, the idea of don't envy, come in. Because if you are in a free market economy and you are envious of your neighbor's stuff, you are doing something wrong, because that person has not hurt you, that they have not harmed you. And if you want to earn more money, to have more stuff, go find a way to serve other people so that they want to buy your product. All right, so we've tried it, right? We have tried socialism. We've tried socialism here on the American shore. It did not work. It has happened all around the world, in countries all around the world, places that have tried socialism, and it does not work because, well, there's lots of problems, and we've hit just on a couple. But the idea that, everyone can work for everyone else produces less stuff overall because no one is motivated, no one has the incentive to work. Now, the socialists might respond, well, we'll just take Elon Musk's money. We'll just take Bill Gates' money. We'll just take Mark Zuckerberg's money. Okay, and again, this is where we go back to the principle laid out in the Bible thousands of years ago in the 10 Commandments: don't covet, don't steal. Do you see how those principles come and apply in a modern context? And then we can see the results when people ignore the wisdom that God put in His Word, they ignore the lessons of history. What happens? It's not paradise on earth, it's hell on earth. Let's have a final pause point here. Who was the person responsible for the most deaths in the 20th century? What do you think? Now, you might say Hitler, and that would be a solid guess, but it's an incorrect guess. This is from the Heritage Foundation. The person responsible for more deaths in the 20th century than anyone else was Mao Zedong. He was the dictator in China. According to the authoritative Black Book of Communism, an estimated 65 million Chinese died as a result of Mao's repeated merciless attempts to create a new socialist China. Anyone who got in his way was done away with by execution, imprisonment, or forced famine. The most inhumane example of Mao's contempt for human life came when he ordered the collectivization of China's agriculture under the ironic slogan, "The Great Leap Forward." A deadly combination of lies about grain production and disastrous farming methods, for instance, profitable tea plantations were turned into rice fields, and misdistribution of food produced the worst famine in human history. Deaths from hunger reached more than 50% in some Chinese villages. The total number of dead from 1951 to 1961 was between 30 to 40 million. That's around the population of California. And Mao did many other terrible things in terms of executing his enemies and executing people he disagreed with. And again, this is why that biblical wisdom from Psalms 146. Do not put your trust in princes. We must always take and evaluate the claims and the desires of political leaders, the goals of political systems, and evaluate them against the Bible. If you trust the prince more than the God of the Bible, it is simply not going to end well. And tens of millions of people have paid for that with their life. If you enjoyed this podcast, please send it to a friend. Let them know, help them help their teenager realize the problems with socialism. I encourage you to subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/@sharpening arrows. Be courageous like Charlie, stay sharp, and give God the glory. I'll see you next time.